Hey, what's up everyone? It's Scott once again and welcome to another video. This time I'm going to be talking about the next entry in the Rambo franchise, Rambo 3. This to me, it's been merited by a lot of controversy because a lot of people say, oh, Rambo helped the Taliban or or this made a didn't exactly make a good impression at the time because before this movie came out, we were kind of at war with Russia. Then we kind of made peace agreements, and they became our allies and whatnot. And so, unfortunately, that's probably why the film didn't do so great. But looking back, despite all that, it's still a fun action film. Maybe it's a slight step down from the second one, but I still enjoyed Stallone. Had some great action pieces, some nice one-liners, and Stallone being pretty, ripped, shredded as fuck. This is probably the best shape he was in at the time. And overall, I think it's a bit underrated. So, and I actually have yet to see the fourth one, but that will definitely be next up, at some point. But yeah, I'll get to the crew and cast like I always do typically. Of course, you still have Stallone and Crenna. They both reprise their roles respectively. Buzz Fetishan's is still the producer. This time, of course, we have a different director yet again. It's Peter MacDonald, but he had some familiarity with the Rambo franchise. He was actually one of the second unit directors on the second ones. But however, originally it did have a different director, and it was Russell Mulcahy, the guy that did Highlander and the movie called Razorback as his debut film. But like I believe 2 weeks in, he was fired due to an issue that Stallone had with him. But I'll get to that eventually later. So Peter MacDonald takes over. You still have Jerry Goldsmith, still giving us, the Rambo themes, and then of course adding on the epic action cues, that really enhance the film. You also have cinematography done by John Stainer. You had like three editors. You have James Simmons, Andrew London, and O. Nicholas Brown. Production company this time was Carleco Pictures. It was an Andrew Vajana and Mario Kassar type of production. And, Carleco Pictures is sadly pretty much long gone. I mean, back in the late 80s, early 90s, they produced a lot of, highly budgeted action films, but then they started making some bad decisions, like Cutthroat Island did them in, and I think they may have had some involvement in Showgirls. So yeah. But anyways, the budget was 58. It was actually the highest of the film. It was the most expensive film of the time because, like you said, it really upped the action and the set pieces and the action sequences. So yeah, the budget was between 58 to 63 million, which was pretty expensive at the time. And the film did make money, but like I said, it was merited with some controversy, which I'll kind of elaborate later on. But it was still, a fairly decent hit for Stallone. But, kind of in the late 80s, he was starting to kind of, I guess, fade down. I guess maybe either other films were coming out at the time, and that's why maybe they weren't seeing his work a whole lot. But anyways, but in addition to the cast, you actually have some other cast members. You have Kurtwood Smith as Robert Griggs, but he's in like in the very early part of the film. He's in there like 10-15 minutes. So then you have the newcomer Mark De Jonge or Jange. I would pronounce his name as the villain Colonel Alexei Zyson. You have Sasan Gabai as Musa Ghani, and Rambo Ralph for Life just got on live stream, but I wouldn't be surprised if he has problems doing that again. Then you have Dudi Shona as Hamed, I believe one of the rebel kids that helps out Rambo. Then you have Spyros Focus, actually, who I remember was Omar from Jewel of the Nile. He's in this film. So yeah, but I'll get to the plot here. So basically, sometime, another 3 years after the events in Vietnam, Rambo has kind of moved on and, lived in Thailand for some time. He's actually, you see him stick fighting, then he goes into live in kind of a Buddhist temple with all the monks and whatnot just to try to find peace within himself. And eventually, he's tracked down by Trautman, who actually, observed the stick fighting and was able to find him at this Buddhist temple. He's actually trying to recruit John to, he's basically Trautman's trying to put together a mercenary team for the CIA-sponsored mission to supply the Mujahideen, the tribes, and then to try to help the people of Afghanistan, to repel against the Soviet fighters who are trying to, attempt to take over Afghanistan. And they basically have massacred lots of people, women and children. And Rambo's been showing photos of the condition of the kids. But despite all that, Rambo refuses to join or aid Colonel Trautman, feeling that his war is over and he wants to move on from being a soldier. Trautman tries to convince him otherwise, and Rambo still feels he's not ready to do all that. He wants to find peace with himself. And of course, Trautman, proceeds anyway. And then, of course, we see a cut to later where he's in Afghanistan, but unfortunately, him and his team have been ambushed by the enemy forces near the border, resulting in some of his men being killed and some others being captured. And he's been captured by the Soviet Colonel Zyson and his henchman Sergeant Kovaro. That actor is, let me see, his name is Randy Rainey. Anyways, eventually the Griggs character, which is Kurtwood Smith's character, informs Rambo of this, and Rambo actually decides to go out to rescue his friend, and basically it has to be made unofficial. Otherwise, if Rambo fails, the CIA in the United States would deny any involvement in any of this case. So he basically gets a chance to undertake a solo rescue to help locate Trautman. He eventually flies to Peshawar, Pakistan, where he interacts with arms dealer Musa Ghani, which is Sehsan Gabani's character, and he tries to convince him to convince Musa Ghani to try to take him across, the Afghan border to rescue Trautman. In the village, which is led by the Masad guy, which is Spiral Focus character, they basically, are trying to decide whether or not to even, help aid Rambo in rescuing him, but they're not really willing to because of the loss of a great many amount of their people, women and children. And somehow, basically the Soviet informant, which is actually one of Afghani's employees, actually informs the Russians about John Rambo's location, and they eventually Zyson and another helicopter. There's two helicopters that are dispatched to try to attack and destroy the village and massacre them. And however, Rambo is able to destroy one of the helicopters by using a turret type of weapon, and because of this massacre, the rebels refuse to aid him further. This time he's only aided by Musa and the young boy Hamid, who attempts to rescue him. So he at first tries to rescue him, but unfortunately it doesn't go so well, as there's some people being held, and he attacks the base, but he inflicts significant damage, in the side of his abdomen, and Hamid as well encounters some damage as well. So you actually, for the first time, see a bit how Rambo is vulnerable to being wounded, and seeing as how he doesn't want to endanger the young kid and Musa, he sends them back, and he decides he's going to rescue him just by himself. He actually makes another attempt to rescue Trautman, and he's able to evade the security, and just when Trautman's about to be tortured with a flamethrower, he's able to take out the men and free several other prisoners and hijack the gunship helicopters to escape the base. And eventually there's gunfire between the helicopter and Zyson's men. Eventually the helicopter becomes damaged during this fight, and they're able to land somewhere where the rebels go their own way, and Rambo and Trautman go to try to cross the Afghan border, and they eventually end up having to hide underground in the cave because an attack helicopter is able to track him down. But apparently Rambo, having some of his explosives arrows left, is able to take it out, and and destroy that helicopter. And then and this infuriates Zyson more further. He attempts to send more commandos under Kurov to kill them, and they are eventually killed pretty quickly and routed. Especially since Rambo's combat experience plays a part of it. He's able to take out some of the men, and even Kurov himself. Although an injured Kurov actually attacks Rambo whenever Rambo gets out of the cave, and a little brutal fight occurs between them. But then Rambo, in the typical superhero type of fashion, is able to overcome him and kill him. And then eventually Rambo and Trautman make their way to the Afghan border, but then Zyson and more of their forces surround them. And despite Rambo bravely trying to take on Zyson and the man, they feel overpowered. But eventually, unexpectedly, more of Mossad's Mujahideen forces, arrive with the cavalry in a surprise charge, and they eventually are able to take on the men. Even though Rambo was being wounded and being shot in the leg, he's able to take control of a tank and actually uses it to attack, the Zysons. Apparently, it's titled Hind, or the Helicarrier gunship, the helicopter battle. Like, you actually see a tank taking on a helicopter, which is actually pretty cool. And Rambo continues to fire the main gun and unleashing so many bullets that actually goes through Zyson, and then eventually the vehicles both collide, but the helicopter explodes, and then Rambo, despite colliding with it, actually survives. And then basically at the end of the battle, Rambo and Trautman say goodbye to the Mujahideen. I guess that's how you pronounce them. They say goodbye to the Afghan people and the rebels, and they leave Afghanistan, and that's pretty much your ending. So basically, what I like about this is I like the fact that it upped the action. There's some great action sequences, like you see how the budget was affected, because they really put a lot of work into this. You see the helicopters, you see explosions, you see whenever the first time you see the massacre, whenever the two helicopters try to locate Rambo because of the fact that he's there trying to rescue him. They take on the village. I mean, the action sequences are even impressive. I mean, hell, you even see Rambo riding on a horse, and it's actually Stallone doing all this. He was really pretty much involved in all the stunts, so it really showed that that Stallone, being at that current age and being in that excellent of shape, it showed that he was able to take on the action sequences. I also like the fact that even though he had kind of a superhero presence in a comic form, it showed how vulnerable Rambo can be. Like the part wherever he gets shrapnel inside of the side of his abdomen because of his first attempt on rescuing Trautman doesn't go the way it planned. You actually see a scene how he actually has to cauterize the wound. He has to push it out, and then actually use a part of one of the assault rifle bullets. He's able to get the tip off and actually puts the gunpowder just to put it in there and get one of the sticks on fire, and he literally lights himself on fire just to cauterize the wound so it doesn't become infected. Very effective sequence, even though I can kind of tell where the wounds the sewed up wound is, because it's a little obvious right there. So unfortunately, while obvious, it's still quite an effective sequence in case if you ever get badly injured in combat or any kind of brutal fight breaks out. But yeah, what I really think I think one of the problems with this film, looking back, is that it kind of really goes away from the plot. I feel like it just jumps right into the action, and it doesn't hold back. Hey, I know it's the 80s, but I feel like there was less of a plot. It's basically, just a simple, rescue attempt. It's like it's almost recycling the plot of the second one in a way, because this time, but the difference is he's rescuing his friend Trautman. I feel like that's where I feel like the plot, there's not really much involved. It's just reusing that same rescue plot yet again. But and I feel like at times that the cinematography was a little flat, because from what I read, even though it was filmed in Israel, a good part of it was filmed in Arizona, so it served as the backdrop for the Afghan border, and I felt like could have been a little bit more, desert-wise. I mean, there were some nice shots here and there, but I feel like, for certain parts of it, it felt like it was just a little flat. And, yeah. I mean, but where the action's there, it's very effective. And then looking back, I wouldn't say he's definitely the worst villain. To me, after seeing Rambo 5, Zyson's definitely not the worst villain, because at least you hate the villains more by the way they treat Trautman and how they torture him and stuff like that. So, what can I say? The flaws were definitely the Risako plot just seems... the plot's just... I mean, it's there, but it just seems simple, and... Yeah. And the fact that cinematography is a little flat, and I keep forgetting there was something else to it. It kind of maybe drags a little bit here and there, but yeah. But of course, I thought Stallone did great. It showed that he really committed himself to this role, and he showed that he was very dynamic. The director also tried to inject a little humor once in a while, like the one-liners, like whenever Trautman asks, how are you doing, John? He's like, well done. And then, of course, hey, John, I'm sorry that I got you into this. He's like, no, you're not. So I like how they try to, have a little levity in the film. Or whenever he's talking with this kid, he's like, it's a cool knife. Can I have this? He's like, no. He's like, and then with kids like, oh, what's this? And Rambo's like, you want everything, do you? Or whenever Zyson and his men surround Trautman and Rambo, he's like, hey, John, what do you think? We don't have enough to surround them. He's like, now's the time for a sense of humor. He's like, and then whenever Zyson continues to say, drop your guns or you'll have a fair trial, he's like, what do you think? And John's like, fuck him. So whenever the action's there, it's there. It really does a great job of the helicopter scenes are well done, especially when Rambo has to hijack to save Trautman and several other prisoners. So all the action sequences are done very well. I mean, you even, like I said, you even see Rambo with a Molotov cocktail, even with the helicopter behind him and trying to do what he can to attack Zyson, even though he gets shot pretty well in the leg, but wounded and whatnot. He's able to take on the guy who's driving the tank. He's able to take him out. He's able to unleash a lot of ammo, and then you see the collision of the tank and the helicopter, and it's done very well. No CGI, all practical. Still holds up very well, considering the budget was used pretty efficiently for this movie. Other than the very flat locations, it does well. Stallone does great. Not only that, the biggest thing is I like seeing Trautman have more to do in this film. Even though he was captured, we actually see him and Rambo actually take on. Like, he actually attempts to take on a few soldiers. Like, kind of wish that maybe he might have been able to help Rambo against that Sergeant Kurov guy. But he does get some moments whenever he's being interrogated by and tortured by Zyson, where Zyson's demanding to know where the missiles are, because he thinks that Trautman is trying to supply the rebels with a bunch of missiles and weapons, even though Trautman claims otherwise. And then he's like, they're close, and Zyson's like, how close? In your ass. And I like how there's some good moments between him and John, like in the very beginning, where John ultimately rejects wanting to go to Afghanistan with Colonel Trautman. He's like, "This is you won't know who you are till you come full circle." And he's like, "What's that?" The fact that you're a combat soldier. And Rambo's like, "I don't want it anymore." And he's like, "Well, that's too bad, because that's what you are." He's like, and he tells the story about the sculpture and how they how he brought the statue, or he's chipped away and created a grand masterpiece, but the statue was always there. They just chipped away the rough edges, and he has to he tells Rambo that he has to face the truth of what he is. And then, yeah, stuff like that. And of course, the moments where they're working together and teaming up, taking out whenever Rambo's about to be killed in the underground cabin. Trautman's able to gun down one guy before he has a chance to take out Rambo. And the underground cavern sequence was done very well, where he shoots. That's how he's able to kill and dispatch, Zyson's forces. He actually kills a few of them with the explosive arrows that he had. Like he was able to take out that one helicopter with the explosive arrow, and it still is a pretty effective sequence. So, and of course, Jerry Goldsmith, he does a great job. He actually has some good moments where the softer themes of Rambo, and then whenever things are getting more intense, like whenever Trautman's captured and the interrogation scenes, and whenever Rambo makes his way to the Pakistan border into Afghanistan, there's some really great themes there. I like his Afghanistan theme, and then whenever the action moments are there, especially in the very end. Dun 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 dun. Can't really do it, but it's something like that. And yeah, Jerry Goldsmith really delivers on his score, and sadly, it was the last time that Goldsmith did one for a Rambo film, because in 2004 he died, and they didn't do the fourth one until 2008, or technically 2007, then it was released in 2008, so yeah. But yeah, I was going to get to the history. A lot of people, because Russia were our allies, this definitely made it look bad, and that's why, unfortunately, it didn't do as well, because the budget was pretty high. It only made like 53 million. The budget was somewhere between 58 to 63 million. Definitely did better overseas, but I think in the U.S. they were hoping it would do better. Unfortunately, because of how we were able to make peace and Russia be our allies, this probably didn't help at the time. And then, of course, there was the other thing where, Rambo helps the Taliban or is helping terrorists. Well, furthermore, back in the day, apparently Russia was actually massacring, people in Afghanistan, and there were probably women and children. And apparently this spiral focus guy, Masad Ahmad, was a real life. That's what apparently this was based on, and apparently this same person, was against, the forces of Russia, and then later on he was actually against the forces, or the Afghanistan, or the Taliban. Pretty much, he was actually trying to reject them. In fact, the Mossad guy actually tried to warn the U.S. about this, about what was going to happen, and like a few days before 9/11 happened, he was assassinated. So I wish I can give you the specific name, but let me go back. I think I can give you his name. It was definitely Mossad. Let's see if it lets me go back. Yeah, actually it was Ahmad Mossad. He was the real-life leader of Afghanistan against the Russian occupation, and he was eventually the Minister of Defense of Afghanistan after the Russian occupation ended. And then he became a leader of resistance again against the Taliban regime. And like I said, he tried to warn the U.S., but unfortunately he was taken out before he could warn them, or can give them the official warning when it failed to reach them. So it's a shame. We might have been able to prevent 9/11 with his help, so that didn't happen. And then, I forgot to mention Russell Mulcahy. He was the original director, but because Stallone didn't like what he was doing, apparently, from what I read on Stallone's interview, apparently he chose these he got these pretty boy-looking people, and Stallone was like, and these were definitely not going to be an intimidation factor for him. And he definitely disagreed on Mulcahy's belief that it would work. But as a result, he ended up being replaced, and that's when Peter MacDonald, who worked on the second unit of the second Rambo film, came in as the director. So yeah, that's an interesting tidbit of information. So, but yeah, other than the few minor nitpicks I have of this film, it's definitely entertaining. It has some nice set pieces, some great action sequences that really show within the budget. practical blood squibs and all that stuff, all done in the camera, no CGI, and to this very day it still holds up very well. And Stallone does fine. They give Richard Crenna's character a little more to do. He actually ends up helping Rambo out. He's able to, fight the scenes that you see him in. He's able to fight off against the Russian forces in the final battle, and the cavalry that helps aid Trautman and Rambo. It's all done very well. It's all within the camera. It's great fun, and doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's just all in good fun. I have no problem with the film, despite, even though you have the little dedicated message where it says dedicated to the gallant people of Afghanistan, or at least the good people of Afghanistan. People are people. Back in the day, it was different. Russia massacred people, probably with women and children, but they were able to square off their differences, and the war stopped, and now Russia became our allies. So yeah. But anywho, it's a film that you definitely can't take seriously. Like I said before, the drawback was the plot. It just seemed a little too simplistic, and there wasn't much of a. I guess there wasn't as much tension looking back, and the realism, they're not realistic, but there was a little bit of a realism into it. But this is where every bit of realism was thrown out the door, and it just became the typical, recycled, mission rescue and stuff like that. But you know what? It did its job well, and I don't expect it to be perfect in every aspect. So it's a fun and entertaining sequel that doesn't really deserve all the hate that it gets looking back. So, but yeah, I'm definitely gonna go on and do a review for the fourth one, since I haven't really seen it. From what I hear, it's pretty gory, and a lot of people say this is where he really truly comes full circle, and that's where it really should have ended. And I'm more inclined to agree on that. So yeah. But yeah, anyway, Slice It, if you haven't seen the sequel, go ahead and give it a watch. I think you'll like it. For those that were maybe critical of it at the time, you have to turn your brain off for this film, and I think if you turn your brain off, you'll definitely enjoy it. It's all in good fun, like I said before, and I feel like I'm repeating myself, but you'll definitely enjoy it. So okay, I'm going to end it here, and hopefully you like this review of Rambo 3. Give it a like, give it a thumbs up, and I'll definitely bring you more reviews in the near future. So I will see you later, folks. Later.